Welcome to Rethinking Trade with Lori Wallach. I'm Lori Wallach, and today we have a special urgent podcast about a big development on de minimis. Remember those past podcasts about de minimis, the sneaky, dreadful loophole in trade law that currently allows 4 million daily uninspected packages to evade normal customs procedures, inspection, the information that's normally required, tariffs, taxes. It's mainly from China and mainly stuff ordered online. It's become a tsunami of evasion of health and safety rules and fair tariffs and taxes. The no inspection problem means, number one, it's a way for fentanyl-laced fake generic pills and other dangerous or also deadly products to slip in. Just public service reminder, don't buy so-called generic prescription drugs online, ever. A lot of it looks like a normal, real website, but alas, it is some fake substance with a little grain of fentanyl made in someone's basement. It can kill you. Many families have suffered this, people who were not addicted to drugs. Don't buy it online. That's why this loophole has to be closed. The loophole also undermines U.S. retailers, especially your local main street stores, but the bigger ones too, and manufacturers, by letting forced labor products and all kinds of unfair stuff that violates U.S. law sneak in without any of the normal trade enforcement and inspection. So there's been a fight to try and get rid of this for years. Donald Trump, when reelected, promised he'd get rid of it. On April 1st, he actually issued an order to phase out de minimis with respect to duty-free access for these small value packages, because this applies to stuff $800 down per day per person, for Mexico, Canada, and China. But then he met with the CEO of FedEx, which, like the other express delivery companies, makes a lot of money on these shipments under de minimis, and Trump reversed course. That was on February 5th. Now, he's issued a new executive order that said that the necessary inspections and processes were in place to reinstate that no duty-free de minimis on China policy again. And that was issued on April 2nd, a rule that said, as of May 2nd, imports from China under $800 could no longer come in duty-free, i.e. the de minimis loophole's duty-free part will be closed as of midnight July 1. So first thing, last Friday morning, May 2nd, that was supposed to be the end of de minimis duty-free access for goods from China. Yay! I mean, this is a really good thing if it's enforced. And that's a big if. And if Trump does not reverse it again, and it's really important, it's extended to all countries' imports. We'll get to why that is in a second. But this China step could be really big if the packages are now going to get treated differently. Keep in mind that the European Commission decided to altogether get rid of de minimis for all of Europe this year. And South Africa, Mexico, Brazil, other countries are realizing it's both a dangerous process, but also one where a lot of tariffs and taxes are evaded. This wasn't supposed to be for commercial shipping. It was supposed to be when you came back from a trip and didn't have to fill out full commercial paperwork. So the advent of e-commerce platforms and this loosey-goosey loophole have created this very serious problem. So is it going to get enforced? And here comes the hitch. Very quietly, on April 28th, before this de minimis for China was to sunset, the Trump administration issued a customs rule waiver. And that waiver could really undermine the end of the de minimis loophole for China. And for that matter, could undermine Trump's claimed goal of collecting a lot more tariff revenue. So you have to have a little background, so bear with me. Generally, the way that U.S. law has worked is for any shipment, any import from overseas, that is $2,500 or less, it's allowed to come in through a process that is called informal entry. Entry has to do with what customs regulations apply for different kinds of imports. So formal entry, which is what's required for those big shipping containers you see in ports and is required for anything over $2,500, formal entry requires a specific customs form, 7501 if you want to look up the form, that has a lot of key information about where a thing was made, what company it was made by, and most importantly, it requires what's called a 10-digit HTS code. HTS just stands for the official tariff list of the US, and the 10-digit code is really a detailed description of what the good is, then associated with what the tariff rate should be for that good. And as well, if it's for formal entry, you have to use a customs broker, which I'll explain in a second. You have to post a bond. It's stuff that basically is pretty accountable when it comes in. Now, informal entry is a system where you don't have to list any of those details. You can just write down what's in the package. So, the sender can just describe it like a shirt. And unlike formal entry, you don't have to have that HTS code, that tariff code. And so the problem there is, and how important the HTS code is, say you wrote down shirt, but there are literally more than 300 different tariff codes just for clothes with a huge variety of tariff levels. There are 50 of them just for shirts. So shirt doesn't really say very much as far as what the tariff should be. Some shirts are duty free, other ones have a 30% tariff. And this is all before you get to the penalty tariffs. With informal, you also don't have to use the customs broker I mentioned. So a customs broker is a person licensed by the US government who takes certain responsibility that the import you bring in is what you say is in there and that the tariffs are paid properly. And importantly, it's a person who ends up having a financial interest in not letting your import cheat. Because if they lose their license, they lose their business. So number one, it has someone to hold you accountable as an importer. But number two, it is somebody who can be sued and who can be held accountable because they have to be in the US. And the US, bizarrely, most countries don't allow what's called the importer of record to be someone who isn't in the US. So otherwise, if you're cheating, there's no one to go after. Also with formal entry, you have to have a bond, which is like an insurance policy to make sure you pay your tariffs, etc. So here's what happened. On the 28th, the Federal Register, the list of official government actions, includes a notice that this customs rule that's been around for a long time, requiring formal entry for all goods valued from $250 all the way to $2,500 that are subject to what are called penalty tariffs, that rule is going to get waived. Now, penalty tariffs are basically any kind of tariff that's not just the normal most favored nation tariff. And under Trump, almost all goods face penalty tariffs. The so-called reciprocal tariffs, some of the anti-fentanyl tariffs, tariffs against goods that have certain kinds of steel and aluminum. So it's really important to actually have all the information to be able to get the enforcement right. And it would make it really hard to collect tariffs on those millions of e-commerce shipments coming daily from China, which, as of last Friday, are supposed to be charged the tariffs. So if the same amount of stuff keeps coming in, it's not going to be possible to inspect either. And part of the thing about informal entry is it's a lot cheaper. So you don't have to have a customs broker, you don't have to have the bond. And part of what we want to achieve with the end of de minimis is to get more of those things that would have been just like 2 t-shirts in a package coming from Shein. You want that containerized where it can get properly inspected. You want 10,000 t-shirts from Shein in a container where someone can do the isotope cotton test on that t-shirt to make sure it's not Uyghur forced labor violating banned imports. And that would be caught because in formal entry in a port, it's all risk assessed and they pull out the stuff they really want to inspect. That's impossible to do if you got 4 million individual packages coming in every single day. So we want more of that stuff in a container. We don't want it coming in informally. And when it's informal entry, it's going to be really hard to enforce. So now here's the really big mystery. The one way to make sure this stuff will get enforced is if the US government requires those 10-digit tariff codes, even if the stuff is coming in informally. And that's just exactly what they are telling everyone in Congress, everyone from the outside who's saying, wait, this waiver is going to ruin everything. What did you do? all of the administration officials are promising that even for informal entry, they're going to require a 10-digit tariff code. And friends, that would make a really big difference. Even more so once the super high, crazy retaliation tariffs of 145% now in China come down. If it's 145% tariff, it's going to cut down the volume of stuff coming from China no matter what. But Trump administration officials have said over and over that's going to come down. So if you have a 30% tariff on China becomes the norm, then you need that specific tariff code to know if there's an additional 30 because there's a standing tariff or it's duty free. That will determine what comes in. And then if we don't have the information, we're not going to be able to enforce. So we have been asking, demanding, begging the administration to tell us if and how they're going to require that 10-digit tariff code. There's some ways they could do it. They just haven't said they are. And without it, it's going to be almost impossible to accurately enforce the end of de minimis and collect the proper tariffs. So here is the thing. When you combine that with informal entry not having a customs broker or some U.S. entity to go after, it's also going to be really hard to discipline against cheating. So even if someone is putting the legitimate information down, you could get it wrong, but there'll be a huge incentive if there's not likely to be any inspection or any real fines available to put down fake stuff. And there are some goods that are outside of the current tariff. So I bet you're going to see a whole bunch of things listed as those things unless the 10-digit code is required. Now, how did this happen? The best way to understand the details, if you really want to, is go to my X account. I'm Wallach Lori, so that's WALLACHLORI. And I have a detailed thread that goes through this and links you to all the documents because it's kind of wonky. But basically, here's how it goes down. On April 28th, Federal Register has this notice. It's a longstanding rule, and it's a pretty big step back because if importers had to use formal entry, it was going to really transform the end of de minimis on April 2nd. So the way it worked is basically you have to use formal entry for anything. How did this all get messed up? Well, some of the express delivery companies started escalating their protests about the end of de minimis, including DHL. It specifically announced it was going to end direct-to-consumer deliveries for goods under $2,500. And in an interesting case of saying the quiet part out loud, DHL mysteriously resumed its direct-to-consumer service of shipping the things de minimis and low-value stuff on the very day the Federal Register notice is posted. And it issues a statement that actually admits that they had their hands on the change. Quote, DHL Express values the opportunity to have contributed to development of this new regulation, end quote. They go on to talk about how they had a very, quote, constructive dialogue between DHL and the U.S. government, end quote, and how they were very pleased that government officials understood their difficulties and operational and technical challenges. Pretty much writing on the wall there. So this company and probably some of the other express delivery companies got that rolled back. And whether all they get is not having to use formal entry or whether really this messes up the real impact of de minimis duty-free access ending from China all comes down to whether or not you have a requirement to list that tariff code. So we're releasing the special episode in part because how all of this is going into effect is incredibly important. And we would like to hear from all of you about your experience buying stuff online that may be coming from China. Please use the comment function on YouTube or email us at info@rethinktrade.org. That's going to help us track what the hell is going on. Because so far from the White House, despite our demands, it's been crickets. And how this gets implemented or not, it matters a lot. A lot of people across this country have lost someone to the de minimis loophole because of a fentanyl-laced fake generic pill that came in and someone thought they were taking medicine for their back pain or taking a muscle relaxer or taking a sleeping pill and they never woke up. It's also incredibly unfair for U.S. retailers and manufacturers and for all the people who are importing fake and dangerous bike helmets, toys, auto parts, etc. The bottom line is we may have just had a really good step on ending the dangerous de minimis loophole. If the White House requires the 10-digit tariff code, it could really make a difference. But we need to make sure that's what happens. We also need to make sure Trump doesn't reverse again. So if you run into your member of Congress, tell them you're really happy with that first step. Make sure that they're telling Trump not to cave when the big express companies try and get them to dump it. And also, it's really important the end of de minimis duty-free access is expanded to the rest of the world. This last point is key because if you Google the term export washing, you will see that already Chinese importers of low-value goods are looking to figure out how to send their stuff through other countries. Duty-free de minimis is still available for a bunch of neighbors like Vietnam and other countries where China often transships goods to get around penalty, tariffs, and other enforcement. So until the whole de minimis loophole is closed, we probably haven't fixed our problem. We hope you'll help us figure out what's going on right now by sending us your experiences, and we promise to keep you posted about each twist and turn. Until next time, signing off, Lori Wallach with Rethinking Trade.